Hey there everybody, and welcome to some RPG horror story cringe with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a tale about what happens when you mix Dungeons & Dragons with a Karen, and a story about a dungeon master running a game for first-time players that want it to be exactly like Critical Role. So, with the preamble out of the way, let's get right into these stories. DM's wife kicks me out of his pay-to-play game. By Reddit user, The Ryu Master. About a year back, I needed to take a break from DMing my own game and decided to look around at some of the pay-to-play games across a few different sites that I frequent. One was a DM with a lot of experience that was starting up a new campaign after his previous one fell apart due to scheduling. I paid my fee and joined in with him and a few of his friends who were also paying, and his wife. Session 0 was free, as he laid the groundwork for the campaign and explained homebrew rules, a homebrew setting, and laid out what the world was like. I ended up going for a tiefling bard, after being warned that tieflings are a kill on sight type of species, because they are actual demons that escaped hell. I knew the risks, and what would come of it if I was caught, and that the party may also join in on killing me. Session 1, and we are shipwrecked on an island, and it's pretty standard stuff. We get band together to survive, with my character wrapped up in baggy clothes, goggles, and a thick turban to hide most of his skin and defining features, and deceptions his way past any attempt to find out about his heritage. All except for DM's wife, who says that she knows what he is, despite failing her insight roll 3 times, and starts trying to expose me. I continue to evade her, and soon she goes to full-on trying to grapple me. It's worth noting that the DM's wife is playing a one-armed artificer who hasn't learned how to make a prosthetic yet, and she fails every attempted grapple against me because they are at disadvantage, and my dexterity is high to keep my stealth and sleight of hand high. I tell a story of how it's against my religion to show my face outside of my home. The rest of the party buys it and stops her from continuing to try and disrobe me. We make camp with a few survivors of the shipwreck and volunteer to find a safer place for camp, as well as look for what is causing the magical storm. A bit of time passes, and we locate a cave and clear it of the monsters inside in order to move the survivors in. Moving in deeper, we start to encounter undead guardians of some lost civilization. We beat them, and the DM's wife finds a magic ring that lets her learn a stored memory from the ring. She uses it to solve a puzzle that we encounter in the next room, then demands that she be the one to keep it. No one really argues with her, and we move on. Once we get deep enough into the cave, we encounter a storm creature that was left behind to protect the lost civilization. I try to talk to the creature and persuade it to end its task, but that merely gets it to go easier on us when the fight breaks out. We beat it with a bit of a struggle, and I notice it drops an orb of some kind. I pick it up, and the DM's wife demands that she gets to keep it. I tell her that she got to keep the last one, and tell her that I would be holding onto it for the group to use after I attune to it first. She starts getting ready to cast a spell on me, and the rest of the party that I have been healing and keeping safe tell her that it's one thing to argue, and another thing entirely to jump to attacking someone. She relents, and with the storm creature defeated, we stop the magical storm and are able to contact a passing ship for aid. On this new ship, on our way to the next port, things start to come to a head. I attune to the orb, and it turns out to be a homebrewed orb of weather control that resets at dawn. I use it once in order to put the wind into our sails and inform the group of what it does. No one really wants it for themselves, and they trust me with it. Well, I say no one, but the DM's wife demands that I hand it over to her, because my kind shouldn't be trusted with magical artifacts. I simply tell her that I won't give it to her until she starts acting polite to me. And once again, she threatens violence, and the rest of the group defend me. She later tries to steal it from me, twice, and I don't relent, but I do offer her an alternative. If she wants the orb so badly, she will have to trade for it. She'll get the orb for one day, and in that time, I get the memory storing ring she took for that time. She gets a legendary magic item, and I get a common item, which was seemingly a bad deal for me. She spends the day studying its magic, and eventually learns its origin, but not how it was made, or how to make it herself. I spend my time on a prank that we'll get back to later. When it comes time to trade back, I give the ring, and she starts taunting me and says that she has no plans to return the orb to my kind. I just shrug, tell her that it's her loss, and walk away. While I'm away, she notices the ring has a new memory stored in it, and of course, she jumps at the chance to use it as blackmail against me, so she uses the ring to see it. What she watches in the memory is me in a mirror, transforming to look exactly like her via disguise self, and going around with my bardic charm, flirting with all the sailors on the ship. I don't perform or promise any acts. I just flirt and flutter my eyelashes, making myself a general nuisance and distraction to the sailors. Of course, she comes chasing after me, and the other party members have to stop her from killing me. I tell her that if she has that much anger about a simple prank, to just perform a prank of her own against me, as I'm still thinking this anger is in character at this point, of course. She decides that she does want to prank me in return, but of course, she escalates it to the nth degree by trying to pour acid in my mouth, as well as blind me by putting it in my eyes while I'm asleep. She fails her stealth roll, however, and I catch her in the act of what seems like attempted murder. I try to run, and she starts casting harming spells on me. I do, however, raise the alarm, and this results in her being put into the brig for the remainder of the trip at sea. We do make it to land, however, and I am ready to simply leave the party and say my farewells. But one member states that it's safer for us to work in a group, and we could really make some money if we stick together. I decide to put it on a trial run and join them, with most of it being just roleplay dialogue. The DM's wife is vehemently against me joining them and tells them that she would continue to try and kill me if I did. The rest of the group says that she shouldn't threaten people like that and tell her that she doesn't have to join them if she doesn't want to. At about this point, I start to feel bad about how things are going between our characters, and I send her a message. It's along the lines of, "Hey, I hope you know that any rudeness from my character is just roleplay. I think you're great, and your character is awesome, and blah blah blah." Basically just trying to make sure that what was going on between our characters is in character, and not her hating me for whatever reason. Though that message ends up being left unread, however. After one more session, where the DM's wife kills 2 random NPCs because they didn't give her exactly what she wanted when she wanted it, she ends up screaming at the DM and storming out of the game. The DM, understandably, ends the game for the night, and I get a message from said DM later that day, saying how he thinks I'm cool and how he would love to play with me again, but he can't have me in the game anymore because his wife threatened to end the game if he didn't. I was just kind of shocked by it, and really didn't know how to respond. Apparently, I later learned from some friends of the DM that we played with that this was the second time she did this, and they ended up leaving the game after that. She apparently will throw tantrums about the game, and go without talking to her husband for days if he does something that she doesn't like. The rest of the players, half the time, also sided with me, not because I had good arguments, but either to just make her mad or just to snub her. Understandably, I decided not to rejoin that group for any activities down the line. Jeez Louise, talk about a self-entitled bratty Karen. It sucks that OP spent time and money on playing this game, only for the Dungeon Master's wife to act like a child the entire time. I mean, that rivalry could have been salvaged in roleplay, and become one of those stories about people not getting along at first, but then growing into a friendship through common goals and tribulations. But it unfortunately turned out to just be a Karen role-playing her Karen self, to the detriment of the game and everyone around her. While it does suck that OP went through this, I think the real victim of this horror story is the DM. I mean, OP just had to spend a few hours with the DM's wife. DM has to live with her. Maybe it wasn't the best call for the Dungeon Master to include his wife in a game that the players are paying for, but I'm sure telling her no would have caused more trouble than it would have been worth. Let's move on. But before we do, if you're enjoying the video and would like to see more, be sure to subscribe if you aren't already, and click the bell. The channel is getting pretty close to 20k, which still blows my mind, and I would like to see if we can reach that goal by July, so be sure to subscribe today. If not for me, then how about the kitties? They are really good meows. But with that said, let's get to the following story. I had a good laugh while my friend told me how his party keeps frustrating him because of tails, furbolgs, and people saying, "That's not how they do it in Critical Role." By Reddit user Philip97X. To start off the story, the game is not mine, but a friend's, which he told me on our last session while we were waiting for a friend to join. He is new to DMing, being a longtime player, and his whole party is fairly new to D&D, never playing it until now. But you guessed it, they have all been watching Critical Role. He told me how infuriated he gets that he has two players that are quote-unquote rules lawyers, or should I say, pretend rules lawyers, that keep saying, "That is not how they do it in Critical Role," etc., which was about dumb things like drinking potions as an action, because there, they do it as a bonus action. Nevertheless, on to the story. He lost his mind when he introduced a Furbolg NPC, and one of the party members asked if he had a tail. My friend said no, because Furbolgs don't have them. But in a certain campaign that is very famous online, they do. And yes, it was Critical Role. So the party instantly became suspicious of the Furbolg, and the DM did not understand why at first. They would follow him around and try to use spells to prove that the Furbolg was wearing disguise self. The Furbolg who was sent there to help them with a mystery that they couldn't solve started running away, and they started attacking him, with my friend, the DM, asking multiple times, "Are you sure about that?" But they kept on going, until they got guards to try to stop them. And they even used their only scroll of Dispel Magic on him, but when nothing happened, they ran away. They ended up being frustrated that they wasted all of their resources, and now they have to sneak around town to find the person that they are looking for. They're blaming the DM, which he got angry about, and after the session, he asked how it was his fault and why they did what they did. And they said, "He didn't have a tail, which meant it was this guy's self." And when he asked why he would have a tail, one of the players said, "Well, in Critical Role, they do." My friend then gave a line that made me laugh so much. "If I didn't have short hair and wasn't balding, I swear I would have ripped my hair out in that moment. Because if I took a shot every time they mentioned Critical Role, I would be an alcoholic and probably in a hospital." Well, looks like the Mercer effect is in play yet again. Now, I think it is great that people are discovering the hobby through exposure to Critical Role, but sometimes new players just want it to be a carbon copy when it's their first time actually playing it. And I can see how annoying it could be when, as a DM, the players keep bringing Critical Role up and how they do things on the show. And it sounds like OP's friend is dealing with just that. And while I cannot really comment on the things that are not in the story, I will say that the Furbolg thing could have been averted. Like, when the players inquired if the Furbolg had a tail or not, and then aired their suspicions after the DM said no, I would have taken that as a cue to inform the players that all Furbolgs in this world don't have tails. That way, they wouldn't have spent so many resources and time to pull the metaphorical Scooby-Doo mask off of someone, only to reveal muscle tissue and a skull. But with that being said, it sounds like the players are bringing up Critical Role way too much during gameplay, And if it is bothering the DM like it sounds like it is, I would advise the DM to just talk with the players and tell them that while you appreciate that they like Critical Role, this game is not that. And them bringing up every little instance of something being different from Critical Role is starting to make running the game not fun for you. Then, hopefully, they would listen, and the DM wouldn't have to feel like ripping out his remaining hair. Let's move on. The game that turned me off of D&D for years. By Reddit user Trickster83. I'm not sure if this story is as horrid as others, but it was probably the reason why it took me a couple more years to get into the hobby that I really love now. This was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and after this session, I didn't play D&D again for 2 years. So at the time, a good friend of mine was getting into DMing and invited a group of us friends to play in a little one-shot. He's brand new to DMing, and we are brand new to playing, but we all know and like each other, so we figure it'll be fun to learn as we play. The group is the DM, me, a generic fighter, first character, I know, DM's girlfriend, also a fighter, but doesn't figure into the story much, friend, a chaotic evil rogue, and friend's wife, a druid. We get plonked into the forest and are investigating rumors of some necromancer doing shady things in a cave somewhere. It's a little awkward getting into roleplay at first, but I'm finding just the act of being another character to be fun, and the DM has encouraged us to get into our characters, and everybody does their best to do so. A bit too much though. The first sign of trouble is in our initial encounter. We come across a bunch of rabid wolves that see us and try to eat us on sight. We're all low level, so we need to pitch in, but Druid decides that because she's a druid, she will never harm another animal. Ever. While we're attacking, Druid tries to take 10 minutes to cast Talk with Animals. When informed that it'll take too long, she actively tries to stop us from hurting the poor puppies. Not like doing PvP or anything, but just generally getting in the way, and at one point, healing the wolves. So what should have been a straightforward battle ends up becoming a frustrating slog. Once the wolves are down, she cries over their bodies and talks about how cruel we are for the rest of the session. She also continues to refuse to attack any animal and actively tries to make our lives harder when we have combat with any beast creature. But the worst was the rogue, who, of course, because he was chaotic evil, had to be the most annoying MFer on the planet. Whenever we got any loot, he would immediately try to steal it off of us. He'd check for traps and then not tell us what he saw, only to wait and watch as his own party members walked into the traps while he laughed like a maniac. At a certain point, I thought to myself, why the hell would we ever have brought someone like this along in the first place? But since I had never played D&D before, I thought, well, I guess this is what real roleplay is like, and just kept it to myself. Despite all of this, we progress in a relatively straightforward manner, until we get to a mini BBEG. A big fight ensues, and we finish him up. No animal companions for him, so the druid was actually helpful, but after the fight, we find a nice longsword in the treasure hoard, which I pick up, and which the rogue immediately tries to steal, despite him not using that kind of weaponry. He rolls high on his stealth and sleight of hand, and does it successfully. I say, out of character, why would you do that? You don't even need this thing. And that's when I first heard the infamous words, "It's what my character would do." I didn't come back for session 2, and took 2 years off of the game. While I found it fun at times, it was also annoying and frustrating. The DM, my friend, eventually got much better as a dungeon master, and learned to shut this type of crap down right away. He eventually invited me back to play in another campaign, in which I had a blast playing. Man, it sounds like OP went through the ringer with their first game, with some of the worst tropes in D&D. a druid that is basically an anthropomorphic PETA, and a rogue that is a kleptomaniac psycho. It does suck that this experience turned OP off of the game for a while, but at least the DM got better, and OP eventually discovered how great this hobby that we all love is. I personally relate to OP, as my first time playing was full of the dungeon master and a player constantly arguing with each other. But years later, I eventually got invited to a game by my friend and her wife, and have been hooked ever since. It just goes to show that sometimes it's good to try things a few times before just writing it off. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.